So, I would like you to raise your hand now in response to the person that you just met. Did they grow up in a city? Did they grow up in a city? Oh, raise your hand if they did grow up in a city.
If they did or did not?
If they did, sorry. If they grew up in a city. Or not just a city, big city. And we say roughly 30%. So I guess that just leads me into a bit of kind of why I'm such an urbanist nerd about different things. Is that there's a philosophy that I've attached to recently that kind of was born out of the riots in Paris in the 60s, called the right to the city. And personally for me, I had an opportunity when I was 21 to move from my hometown in Wisconsin in the Midwest, Trump land, unfortunately, to live in Madrid. And in the spirit of kind of pride month as well, that city allowed me to feel comfortable about myself, to learn things, to expand my mind, and I guess kind of burst my bubble in a way of kind of what the city means to me, what the city offers to people, and it actually allowed me to come out as gay in a space. So that was, this massive opportunity. And I think once I read this Right to the City, there's a quote from a geographer, David Harvey, that says, "The freedom to make and remake our cities and ourselves is one of the most precious yet most neglected of our human rights." And when I read that, I was like, whoa, holy shit, that is so true, because that's all, I mean, most of us probably work on cities and in different facets with what the city means to you, but I think we all tie into coming to a city, and perhaps, London obviously is the example today of what that means to you and what that offers you. And things that you can't get outside that city. So, but there's something for everyone as well. So I guess when I think about loneliness in the city, it's almost this unfair kind of hangover you get in this big, beautiful city, and all of a sudden people, anyone can feel lonely in any sort of situation. It's very subjective as opposed to social isolation, which is a more objective thing. You've hurt your hip. You live far away, you can't get somewhere, so it's more of an objective, I can't go and do these things I want to do, whereas loneliness, you could be right here, feeling really lonely in a room full of people, or even someone next to you that you know. And I guess what the Loneliness Lab is that at the end of 2017, Lendlease, the massive developer who sometimes does things in quotation marks about inclusive design, but we won't mention that, talked to all the residents that we have in different projects and said, what's the biggest issue with living in London? And I wasn't out with the team at the time, but they were shocked because we thought it was going to be something around sustainability metric, air quality, etc. But time and time again it came back to loneliness and social isolation. And quickly, a bunch of people at the office probably said, "Oh shit, we can't do this. How do we fix this?" So we got together with a non-for-profit collectively and put together basically a loneliness lab. So a week-long design sprint. I joined last August, recently after moving to London, and within 2 weeks I said to my boss, "Can I take a week off to go fight loneliness?" And luckily she said yes, and I luckily got accepted to the team. And we sat there for a week and we learned about loneliness. We got together policymakers, NGOs, urban designers, architects, fashion designers, anyone you can think of. We were in the room and kind of testing different ideas, getting together and getting really comfortable with each other as well, like talking to each other, not just sitting next to each other in awkward silence like we do on the tube and everywhere else in the city. And it came up with some really beautiful things and kind of changed the way I think about cities. But there's now kind of separate from my day-to-day job, I'm still continuing to work on this, and I worked on student accommodation. And we saw horror story after horror story after student accommodation experiences with students saying, I only made friends because I was self-harming in the bathroom and I met someone else who was self-harming. having events that only revolve around drinking for people that can't drink. How do you make friends if you can't go, if you can't engage in the type of events that are set up for you? And even in the unfortunate case of a suicide after a continued amount of fire alarms going off at 3, 4, 5 in the morning for months on end. And we learned that loneliness as well it happens in these massive transition periods, and it's actually a precursor to further to other mental health issues. And it's just one death is too many. So for me, it's something that's very near and dear to my heart. And I think what the lessons that we learned from within the loneliness, especially in my space, was kind of this. There's a stigma around just even speaking to each other. A stigma around the language of loneliness. Is it weird to feel lonely? No, it's human to feel lonely. And there's also the fact that many of our spaces are actually designed to make us feel lonelier. For example, in kind of dense situations or denser buildings, if you have a fob to your kind of flash new flat, you can go into the lift, you can go only to your floor, you can only go into your section of that building that is related to where you live. How the hell are you going to make a friend who's a neighbor? How are they have to come down and get you if they live in the same building? There's different things like that that's just absurd. And just because of privacy or kind of in the spirit of probably just capitalism, we've stopped becoming human. And so the points that some of the other speakers have touched on tonight, kind of the effects of austerity, the shutting down of community spaces across the country. We're lacking those third spaces. We're lacking those. We don't have room in our houses because our houses are freaking small because we can't afford to have a big house in London. We can't have our friends over. Where do we go that isn't the pub? I mean, there's not many places. So it kind of from that lack of third spaces. And these third spaces, I guess, relating back to the brief, is where we share food, where we share our emotions, where we share time with friends and family, ideas, problems, anything. But if we don't have those spaces, how can we get to this kind of sharing economy that we envision in this kind of utopian space? And we also touched this evening on increasing inequality and the low levels of inclusivity across our cities. So if we don't have these spaces where we can be and kind of share the weight of life in cities, we're only going to see worsening inequality and lower levels of inclusivity. And I think, and a few solutions. I'm trying to have some solutions, but that's a bit esoteric. But at the same time, I think relating it back to the right to the city, I think we need to fight for the right to kind of regain control back to our cities. And I think technological elements and different platforms are going to help us regain. A lot of the work you guys are doing is amazing. And I even think of an example in Chicago that I saw once. That was a poster in an empty shop front that just said, "Text this number. What do you think you want? What do you want there? Do you want a coffee shop? Do you want a bakery? What do you want?" Pretty easy. But something simple as that just kind of starts to build agency again for what the city is to us. We use it, not corporations, not investors that live in New York. It's us. So it's kind of if we all start to believe in that again, I think there's a lot of power that collectively we can have. And also back to sharing. If we're going to have this a sharing economy where we're going to start sharing, the saw from your neighbor next door and something else from over here, we need to kind of change ourselves, and we need to kind of start sharing more about ourselves. We need to say hi to each other and say what's going on. I mean, we're so good at just zombie mode, headphones in, going home, going to work, going to the gym, don't speak to me. But we're really going to have to kind of change the way that we view each other. There's 10 million of us here just in the city alone. How are we going to start sharing if we don't speak to each other? So I would say we're going to have to change ourselves and our city if we're ultimately going to have this kind of sharing city of the future. Thank you.